Do you have a dress or a blouse that's just a little too snug? I know how devastating this can be when you really need to wear it to an event and it doesn't fit anymore. We're going to be opening up the seam allowances in a professional way to let that extra ease back into the garment. But what if you don't have enough seam allowance to give you all the ease that you need for your size? Don't worry, I have a second way that we can definitely make this work. So I actually just finished this for a client here in my alteration shop, so stay tuned, hit the like, and let's go. So this is the top that we're going to be making bigger. We're going to start by seam ripping these side seams. Let's take a look at this side seam. So we have a meshy layer on the top that seems to go into the other seam. And then in here we have one layer and another layer that are coming together at the bottom hem of the blouse. So I'm going to start ripping right here where they closed it. Okay, now we can go in here and I'm just going to start opening up the side seams. Okay, now that I have that seam apart, let's take a look at how this is constructed. This is the underarm, so I tore this apart all the way down. This is the hem. I haven't tore it all the way apart down here. So you can see there's a meshy top layer that goes with this other layer, 2 layers. So there's 3 layers here that all are in a sandwich that were turned in like this and stitched with the side seam with the other one like it. So these 3 are acting as one on the side seam, although at the hem, this one's by itself and it's with, there's 2 here and then there's the 1 here. So this one here is the lining that I haven't ripped open yet. So the lining is by itself, and then on the other side of the opening, we also have those same 3 pieces, the outer, the first layer, and then the lining layer, not counting the final lining layer in there. Okay, so that is what we're looking at. So we need to add at least an inch to each side of this blouse. Okay, so I've ripped open the side seam here, and then I just took the 3 layer sandwiches and folded them the way that they were when they were sewn. So this was sewn to this, and I just pinned it so that we could keep them together and we could look at them. So I'm seeing here that they gave us a quite generous amount of extra fabric in here. I'm going to show you the lining first because it's going to be so easy to see. So this is the first stitches that were already there that I never ripped out. So I need to add a 1/2 inch to this and sew again, and then pull this out, and that will open this up. So if we go a 1/2 inch away from here and sew, that's going to give 2 layers of a 1/2 inch, so it's going to give us that full inch we need on this side, then we'll get another full inch on the other side. So I'm going to find the 1/2 inch marking on my ruler and put the stitch underneath that marking. So then I can draw a line here, and that will indicate a 1/2 inch away from the original stitch. So this is where I'm going to sew, right here. So I'm going to make this line, and then when I get up here to the top, I didn't really need any additional inches added to the underarm or the hem, so I'm just tapering it here. So where this ends, this is going to have to come up and just come to a point up here. So just make it so that this point is gradual, and try to make it fairly the same on the other side. So I'm just lining the ruler up all the way up in that point and making a little angled line that reaches from that point where the stitch starts, and it comes down and it meets up with the 1/2 inch line that we're drawing here. And we'll do the same thing down at the bottom hem. Okay, so now we have a line that we're going to sew on. Okay, I just put a brand new sharp needle in my machine because I don't want to deal with this tightly woven fabric running. So now we're going to sew on this pencil line. So we need to start on the original seam. So I'm going to get into the machine, I'm going to drop the presser foot, and I'm going to make sure that it's not bunched up, and I'm as high as I can get on that original seam. I'm going to start with a back stitch to lock it in. Now I'm just going to follow my pencil line here, which might be hard for you to see, but it's right here. And I'm just going to taper out along it and stitch along it. End with a back stitch after you've met up with the original seam. So we sewed a new line that was 1/2 inch away from the old line. So now we're going to take the seam ripper and rip out the old line. So that's going to allow the fabric to open up in there, making the garment bigger. So after you rip out this old line, that takes care of this lining side. So you'll do the same thing to the other lining side. Okay, so now the lining is done on this side. So now we have to deal with the outer part. So we have these 3 layers here, and I've temporarily pinned them to keep them together, but as we work on this, it's not going to want to stay together. So we should take a basting stitch and stitch along the edge here. So making sure you're keeping it where it was originally folded, and the layers do not actually line up at the edges, at least not on mine. It's more important that they are where they were folded because that's where the seam was. So just keeping everything in line as it was there, I'm going to take my basting stitch. I'm going to turn my stitch length all the way up to 4 for a temporary basting stitch. And we'll do that on the other opening too. Now we have the 3 layers secured as one so that we can work with these openings. And we're going to do the same process we did with the lining to make it bigger, but we can't access this inside out. So we have to come to the inside here, and we have to tear a little hole in the lining that we just sewed. In the side seam of our lining, we just need to tear a little hole so that the whole piece can fit through it and be inside out while we work on it. And you might be wondering, could have I just left this hole instead of sewing it? And you could have, but I prefer to actually sew it closed and then rip it open. That way this seam allowance will stay the same, and also then I don't have to deal with as many back stitches and cutting thread. It's just easier. So there's our opening. Now you will reach inside there and pull everything through, the whole thing. Okay, so now here we are back to our opening, and now it's inside out like we need it. So you can easily see the original stitch lines here because the dots are still there from all the stitching. So you can easily see where the original stitching line was, and we're going to do the exact same process we did for the lining. We're going to draw a line that's 1/2 inch away from this line to sew on. So I'll use my ruler. I'll line that up and draw that 1/2 inch line. Same thing, you'll taper at the top and the bottom. Now we're going to align our 2 layers and pin them. You might be wondering, where do you align them when all this stuff doesn't line up perfectly? And where they needed to be aligned was where this fold was, where you can see the little holes for the original stitch line. That's what needs to be aligned, and then close the rest down over it and pin. If all this stuff doesn't line up, don't worry about that. We need it aligned where it was before so we can make it exactly an inch bigger than it was before. So just pin like that, and we'll go over to the sewing machine to finish this up. Make sure you turn your stitch length back down to 2.5 or 3. And now we're going to do the same thing we did on the lining. We're going to start on this tapered line up here, starting with a back stitch. Now we're ready to come to that opening that we made in the lining and pull everything back through. So we're turning it back right side out so we can see the alteration we just did. Okay, so here we are. You can see that it opens up a lot more than it used to. You can see that's where it used to be. So we've given the person a whole inch of extra ease at this side seam. So now we just need to close the hole on the lining. And again, you could do this by hand if you wanted it to be invisible, but I'm going to do it on the machine since it is on the inside, and that's perfectly acceptable to do. So I'm pushing all the raw edges to the inside and aligning those folded edges there. This is where the hole begins, so I'm going to start sewing a little bit behind that, really close to the edge, maybe 1/8 of an inch, starting with a back stitch. Okay, the opening ends right here, so I'm going to go just a little bit beyond that and end with a back stitch. So what if we don't have enough seam allowance to let that amount out? Then we're probably going to be inserting some of these scraps that I cut off the hem of the pants. And the person will be wearing a jacket over this so the side seams won't be seen. So this will be a perfect solution for making this too small blouse fit fine. So what I need to do is add 1 inch to either side, and this strip is just a little over 1 inch, so that'll be perfect. So this will end up going inside the 3 layers that act as one. Basically, it'll just go inside here like this. And then these 3 layers, I will fold them in the same place they were folded before. And then I'll just lay them down on top of this panel like that. And then I will stitch it. And then I'll take the other side and gather up all 3 layers, fold them right where they were folded before, and then lay that there. And then we'll have this side panel. Now, it might be better for us to hide this side panel as much as we can, so instead of folding these right where they were, I'm going to actually make much less of a seam allowance there. And then I'm going to try to hide as much of this panel as I can. I might even end up opening out at least one of the meshy layers to be covered by the other at some points, just so that the side panel is covered by the mesh as much as possible. Okay, so now we can start to get our pieces ready that we cut off the hem of the pants. So I'm just opening this up and pressing it. Now I'm going to draw some lines on this because this is 2 inches wide and I only need 1 inch to be showing on the outside of the garment. So I'm going to mark that inch section here. And I'm going to make my first line there. So I'm just drawing a straight line, and then off of this one, I'll make the 1 inch. There's my first line. Now I'll put the 1 inch marking on that line, and then I can mark down here. So now I have the 1 inch section that is going to be the usable space on the strip. And I'm going to do that to all of my strips here. So we made our 1 inch amount here, and we're going to slide that into the opening. And then come down here. Mine didn't need any added to the hem portion, so I just left that intact. So down here where the opening is, I'm going to center this in the center of my 1 inch rectangle and pin that in. Now we're going to be working along the top and the bottom on both of these lines. So just take your fabric where it's folded here and just line it right up against that line that we drew. Like that. Okay, so it's nice and flat all the way to there. And then we'll just stick some pins in here. And we'll come all the way along like this. And then you'll do the same thing along the top here. And you'll have to let it taper because it is going to have to turn into a little triangle here. So just let the top and the bottom taper at the same angle until they reach being straight along the line. And just get it all lined up here. Then once you have it all pinned into the opening, you're just going to stitch it in. So you can do this by hand or by machine. If you want it to be invisible, you can do it by hand. So then if you actually have more meshy stuff under here that you could open up to let it cover that, that would look nice too. So like say you didn't have as much fabric as I did, but you did happen to have at least one layer was long enough, at least the mesh, because it doesn't have to be long enough to have the seam allowance. It just needs to be long enough to at least travel over to there so that other stitch can lock it in. So that's what you can do if you have that option. So you'll just do this to both of the outer panels, and then you'll do the same thing in here to the lining. Okay, well thank you so much for watching that video on how to let out your lined dress or blouse. I really hope that that helped you get your dress or blouse fitting again, and now you can wear it to the event. Whether you use the first method of letting out the seams or the second method of using the panel, leave me a comment down below and let me know how it went. Or if you had any additional comments or other ways that you might have gone about this, I would love to know. Or if you still have any additional questions, drop those down there too. I'd love to try to help. If you're into this kind of thing, please subscribe to the channel. We put out a new video every Monday, and it's all about sewing deep dives just like this. Sometimes we cover machine troubleshooting, sometimes we cover fun project techniques, all kinds of different things here at the Pindrop shop, and we would love to have you around. So please hit that like button, hit that subscribe, hit those bells, and I'll see you next week for another video. Happy sewing!